Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Stafford with CRTPO, and today we wanted to talk with you about planning funds and projects and the steps on getting your projects funded to completion. So with that, I will start. The outline today, I'm going to do a short introductions and then an overview of the purpose, our website, projects, a timeline, and then an overview of basically the procurement steps, everything from applying for the grant to, like I said, the invoicing and getting paid reimbursed for it. And then I will sort of repeat the overview steps, but this time with an example timeline and a little bit more detailed. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Since we're recording today, if you can hold your questions or enter them into the chat, that would be great. So today we have Andy Bailey and Dominique Boyd with us. They work with NCDOT. They're in the Transportation Planning Division, and they are going to help me with questions and answers, and then fill in any blanks or stress anything that needs to be really hammered home, so to speak, as I go through the steps. So I will pause from time to time as we get into the details and just let them add any additional information. My goal, though, is to try to streamline this too, so you can follow it visually and verbally. So with that, so the purpose of the webinar, this is our third discretionary funded webinar, where we are trying to do a little bit more in the nuts and bolts or in the weeds of these projects. So oftentimes we do presentations and they're so high level that when you actually get the funds, you're like, wait, what do I do? So that's the purpose of these webinars, and we have a couple more that we'll have. This webinar, of course, is on planning projects and funds. So let me just clarify, unlike capital projects where we have PE funds or preliminary engineering funds, these planning funds are more for studies like master planning, feasibility, that type of thing. So we'll go over a list of examples on eligible projects, but I just wanted to clarify that up front because it does get confusing. Before you might start the actual design of a road, you might do a little bit of planning work, but there is actually a gray line there, but think of the PE as capital projects and the planning as a larger study. So once a year, we open a call for projects, and it's typically August through October. Actually, right now, we're accepting applications for planning projects, and I'll go over where to find those applications. We award about $500,000 or 1% of the total budget. Sometimes we go over, I think last year we were at 750, or maybe it was the year before. So, but our target is about 500,000 or 1%. The funds are reimbursed. They're typically an 80% reimbursed, 20% match, where the town pays up front 100%, and then the city of Charlotte, CRTPO, reimburses the 80%. Typically, this is quarterly. It can be done a little bit sooner if you really need it for cash flow, but typically it's quarterly. CRTPO or the city of Charlotte actually fronts the money, is reimbursed then by NCDOT, who is reimbursed by FHWA. So that's where we have NCDOT's got stake in the game too, because they're managing the funds as well. So they are here. They sometimes it feels like it's another step inviting them, but believe me, they are the risk management with all of us. So if something's going wrong and they approved it, then we can look back at them. But really, they are here to help make sure that we have followed state and federal, or basically federal guidelines all the way. So look at them as being very helpful, and they are. We are recording this information today. There will be a fair amount of examples. Some of them I'll pull up as we go into details. The presentation will be posted on our website. I'll also convert it into a PDF as well. So you can just grab the presentation in PDF, and then you'll have the links to the examples. And I'll show you that in just a moment. The examples, if I forget to mention it later, many of the examples I'm going to show you, I developed myself. Some are from other staff at the City of Charlotte. My background is actually in contract management. I'm also a landscape architect, but so I have that contracting background. And with planning funds, the upfront, as some of you probably know real well, is a lot of just procurement steps. And that's really what we're going to cover a lot about today. You may check with your legal. If you're about ready to type over something that I'm giving you today, you might just run it by your legal to make sure it's okay with your jurisdiction, but you don't need to always recreate the wheel. Also, part of the purpose of the webinar is just for you to see how much staff work there is. Hopefully, by the time we're done today, it might seem a little overwhelming, but with the examples that I'm going to give you and just seeing the timeline, I'm hoping that you can start to determine if you want to apply for the grant, how much staff time you'll need, and then you can work with your consultant to get the actual studies done, assuming you're going to use a consultant. We are here at CRTPO and NCDOT to help you. So even if the steps, if they're clear or they're, you have some side step that your jurisdiction needs to do, we are here to try to help you through this journey, and we want a successful project. So with that, I will get into details a little bit more. So our website, and let me just go to it. I'm going to do my best at opening up some of these as we go. So when you go to CRTPO's website, it looks like this. And if you can go to plans and programs, discretionary projects. And here, well, there's two things. Number one, as I mentioned, our fall call for projects is open. In other words, if you want to apply right now until October for planning funds, you can come here, and the application is right down here under application materials. Over here, we just started this new tab yesterday, thanks to Judy, and it's a planning projects resource tab. And so we'll go through most of all of these documents today. But we have, for example, the guide for federal aided program. And in that, we'll talk a little bit about eligible program projects. So, and then here's some examples that, again, you're welcome to type over, compare to what you have, whatever's going to work for you. So, that. Here's some example of eligible projects. And again, if you think of master plans, corridor studies, feasibility studies, that type of thing. And here's your link to the guide. Now the guide is like 325 pages. Here's your hint. Thanks to NCDOT telling me that. So page 102 sort of defines it. So it's there. The CRTPO resource guide, again, it's very helpful. This winter is my goal to update it, but the information is still relevant, and there's some good stuff in there, but I think today is going to help you quite a bit. So the catch with these projects is that there's a pretty fast turnaround time. So CRTPO strongly recommends that planning funds be used within 12 months. So it is a fiscal year, it's July 1st to June 30th. You can have an extension, and I can tell you that some of the large projects, we have a study right now that's like 250-ish thousand, and I'm already planning on carrying that over. So it can be extended into the second fiscal year, but it does need a formal approval by the CRTPO board. And you will see in my steps that I'll be in contact with you, but also I want to make sure that you let us know that you can see as you're going along that you're probably going to need to spill over into that next fiscal year. And everyone here wants you to be successful, so we'll work with you as much as possible. You can do it in a year though, and there's people on the call that have done it, and it's impressive. And the more experience you have, the easier it will be. But again, if you don't have the experience and it's a big complex project, chances are you're going to go over that year. I'll just be upfront with you. Here's an example of some awarded projects. This is an older list, but it's still relevant. You can see the project name, the planning funds awarded, the local match, so the 80-20 split, and then the total cost of the project. So now I want to go over a very high-level overview of the steps just to help you see the big picture. And then I'm going to go into details, and probably even after I go into details, I'm going to go back and summarize one more time, because I think the clearer you can see what to do next, the easier it's going to be to get your head around how much time these projects take. So with that, you'll hear the information at least twice, maybe 3 times. So I have little asterisks in here on when to include NCDOT, and I think that's probably a pretty gray area for many of you. And sometimes even with the experience, it's like, oh yeah, I need to include them. So I've included the little asterisks here, and as we go into details, I'll actually insert more information. So you apply for the grant, the board awards the grant. We will execute an agreement. So again, City of Charlotte is the lead agency for the MPO. So the agreement will be with City of Charlotte, and basically in that agreement, it will be, it'll be, that's a reimbursable grant and that you need to follow the federal guidelines. Then you can start drafting your request for qualifications or your request for letter of interest, depending on what you'd like to call it. Start forming your selection committee, then you'll advertise, then you'll get all the submittals back, and you'll have a selection committee to review the submittals, hold the selection meeting, hold the interviews if necessary, select a firm. The applicant creates a cost estimate to NCDOT, and I'm leaving that highlighted because if you've worked with me in the past, this is a new step that I didn't realize needed to be done. I think it's a relatively old step. I just didn't know. So if I've been walking you through steps up until now, I've been missing this one. And basically what it is, it's your cost estimate for the consultant. So you put down the number of hours that you think is needed for the project. And Andy and Dominique, as we get towards the end, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. And then you'll want to draft a contract with the consultant. You'll send the draft contract to NCDOT, and they'll review the fees. And all of this is hopefully done before July 1st. So again, when I go through the timeline, hopefully this makes sense. That's looks like a lot of information, but it's doable. And if you have some templates to type into, I think it makes it even easier. So sometime after July 1st, when you get the okay from NCDOT, you can issue a notice to proceed to the consultant. And then you start working with CRTPO a little bit more closely on quarterly updates and reporting, reimbursement request, and then hopefully your work is complete the following year. And then you can present the study to us. So again, I'm going to go into details here. So on the left, I have included 2 documents. I'm not going to click on them. The top one is NCDOT's policy for basically for procurement of your professional services, and that's a great resource. It's dated 2016, but it is the latest one. The second document is like a 3-page procurement walkthrough, and you might find it helpful. What you might enjoy looking at is there is red text in there that will show you what NCDOT's transportation TPD, Dominique Boyd will look at your documents and look for what specific information. So you might take a look at that. So again, about this time of year, if you're going to apply for funds, you would apply. We now do a pre-submittal meeting. So that meeting is pretty informal. It's typically just with me for the planning projects, and I just ask you about what the scope is, what your challenges are, what your experience is, just so I know how much I might need to help you, understanding the process, that type of thing. So it's pretty, again, pretty informal. And usually by December, we'll have a draft list internally anyway, and it's usually made public around December or January. So on my side, I can start drafting an agreement between the City of Charlotte, CRTPO, and the jurisdiction. So nothing for you to do. It's all on my side, but just so you know what's going on behind the scenes. Then in March, CRTPO board awards the project. So assuming you're selected and everything is approved, then I would get with you and we would execute the agreement. And usually what I do is I send out these award letters that look like something like this. And so it just says basically saying congratulations. I hope it says that. If it doesn't, I say that in the email. What your project is, the total project cost, what we're reimbursing. And again, that's an up to, not to exceed. So if you go over that, you're held liable. And then your local match committed amount. I might have said this before. So the town pays upfront the full project cost, and then you request the reimbursement of the 80%. And then the rest of the letter is a little bit about the steps. Here's Dominique Boyd's email and phone number. And so he gets included right from the get-go. And then a little bit more here and letting you know that I'm here to help you as well. So you would get that letter. And then in April, so very much like any other city project that you do, if you do start working on a draft request for letters of interest or RFQ, you're assuming a little bit of risk in that I suppose you could you've been awarded the money. The project doesn't actually start until July 1st. There's a chance that you could get all the way through the contract negotiations and it really falls through and you get to your board and they don't want to do it. I suppose that could happen. I haven't seen it happen here yet. So you would have some vested staff time, but again, that could happen with any project, not necessarily just CRTPO. When you do submit an application with us, there is a letter of commitment that you do have the match. So, but in saying that, we want you to be successful. So we'll work with you as much as possible. So let me talk about the RFQ just a little bit. And I will tell you, I have these little plus signals here. That's just to remind me as we talk that these are Word documents and I need to pull them up a little bit different, but also for you, when you go to the website, these Word documents, you can download them. So some of these are PDFs and some are downloads. So in every request for letters of interest RFQ, we need to include transportation planning discipline codes, and I'll open that in just a second. We also need to require that all the vendors are pre-qualified with NCDOT. So again, hopefully having these links right here will help you. So here are the list of discipline codes. And the way this works is a consultant will apply to be pre-qualified with NCDOT. When they pre-qualify with NCDOT, they are pre-qualifying for these codes. So after they pre-qualify, and once they're qualified, they get a notice back from NCDOT saying you're qualified to do code 140 for travel demand model development. And so they know right then. And so when you put these codes in your RFP, it might look great to us, but to the consultant, they'll know what you're talking about. And if you have a consultant that needs to be pre-qualified, get them started on that early. Shut down. The vendor directory. This is a list of all of the vendors who are qualified, pre-qualified, and you don't necessarily need to use this, but you could choose to use this in doing your solicitation. So you'll want to advertise your RFQ, but you can also send out emails letting them know that you've posted the request for qualifications letter of interest. The request for qualifications letter of interest, it doesn't matter what the title is, you need to have so much in the document, and people use these terminologies different. That's why I keep using both. Some people even say an RFP, and the RFP is really confusing because some people look at that as more like something that, buying like snow removal services where you're getting prices for that type of service. But on these professional services, typically the city of Charlotte will do an RFQ where you're just asking for the qualifications. And NCDOT calls it letter of interest. So don't let the terminology confuse you. I will show you an example from both NCDOT and the city of Charlotte where it has all the information in it. Here's a link to NCDOT, and again, it just talks about the pre-qualification. When you have NCDOT on your committee, they will also help make sure that you're going to hire somebody that's pre-qualified. So you won't get too far if you start to look at the wrong firm. Let me pull up the city of Charlotte first. Last week I started working on this RFQ. Whoops, see, I knew that was going to happen. Didn't have a little plus. Bear with me just a second.
And Jennifer, while you're looking, can I mention something?
Yeah, please do.
One of the things that gets, Dominic is very aware of this, that gets us hung up quite a bit is that pre-qualification of a consultant. Typically, the people who bid for it, or the prime consultants, are typically pre-qualified and qualified for the codes. But sometimes they choose a sub-consultant that is either not in our system or has not been pre-qualified yet. So that's important to know when you're looking at these proposals, and especially focusing on the subs to make sure that they are in the system.
Good point. And yeah, the subs need to be pre-qualified too. Perfect. So this is a City of Charlotte template. And again, you feel free to download this. It will download in Word, type over it. I don't care. Here's your, in the table of contents, you'll have the public notice that you're basically opening up the advertisement, and then a little bit about the process, your selection criteria process. And then for the City of Charlotte, this is just some of the terms, and you probably have your own, your attorney might be okay with using these anyway. And then North Carolina Department of Transportation and federal contracting requirements, and then some forms. So again, on City of Charlotte's RFQ starts with this public notice. I included that this is federal aid funded, so that will help your consultant understand the depth of the work. Here's those discipline codes that I talked about. So the firm state statute is they need to be registered with the Office of Secretary of State of North Carolina. That's just a given anyway. And that here's number 2 is that they need to be pre-qualified and they need to fall in one of these discipline codes. And then in this one, it's really draft form, that a little bit of a project overview and then the schedule. And I'll go into this a little bit of detail, but you'll advertise if you have a pre-submittal meeting. So if you have a complex project, you might want to have a pre-submittal meeting. We haven't always done those on these smaller projects, but it's not a bad idea. You want a period where you have the questions, so your potential submitters can ask you questions, and you need to make sure that you have enough time to answer the questions, and it needs to be posted so everybody can see those questions. And sometimes those questions actually end up leading into an addendum. If you want to be real technical, question and answer and addendums are 2 different things. Question and answer is just answering questions. An addendum changes the RFQ or the scope. So I have seen people get in trouble if you're doing questions and answer and you call it an addendum, you're going to be held to it. And if you just meant to answer a simple question, you might be held to it. So be careful with that. Your due date, so there is no statutory requirement on how long you need to post it, unlike, for example, construction projects. I would say a month is good. If you need interviews, you can actually put down, 3 days that you'll be doing, or in this case, I just put a month in there. They might even delete that. And then the selection announcement, and give yourself a little room in there. So like in this case, I just put a month. You put the exact day, they're going to hold you to it. The selection criteria. So this is important because this is the way you select firms. And if you start using some other criteria halfway through your reviewing proposals, you could get in trouble real fast. So this is the only way you can hire or select your firm. You've got to go by these. So make sure that's well thought out. And then down here is a request of what you want to see from the proposer. And again, these tabs should match your criteria. So if you're asking them for this, ask them exactly what you want to know about their qualifications. What is their project understanding of after reading the scope of work? And your scope could be very general. When you select the firm later and you want to get a little more detailed on the scope, they can work with you on that. And then maybe, a little bit about their demonstrated experience, something like that. And then down here. And in this case, well, this has all the forms. Again, you're welcome to use all these. In this case, we had the scope at the end. I suppose that could be moved up. Oops, I see a typo. So there's that one. Now let me show you in contrast. This is NCDOT's template, and you can see it's a little bit maybe easier to fill out. It's got the fill in the blanks, and so these little comments over here, we'll say more later on, but you'll have the contract name, the title, when it's issued, your name. Here's the part about talking about your work codes for each primary and sub-consultant that Andy just mentioned. The proposed contract summary of scope that you'll write, then how they actually submit their proposal. So it's just fill in the blank, how many years. Now I will say down here on the contract payment type, I would probably use the term fixed fee instead of lump sum. Again, don't get caught up on the names, but we reimburse it like every quarter. So it's not a lump sum payment at the end. And you might have a consultant that would think it's a lump sum at the very end, and they might not be able to go a whole year until they get payment. So they might get nervous about submitting, but it's a quarterly reimbursement. So again, I might word that a little bit different, but the gist is there. Go ahead.
Jennifer, if a lump sum is a standard form term, so we probably don't want to deviate from that. If you want to put some kind of example that it's really a cost fee and it's paid quarterly, you can do that. But lump sum is something that is pretty much what we have to have.
Okay, sounds good. And then it goes into a little bit about the selection and pre-qualification. So there's some standard language in here, and then you'll have, again, your selection criteria. And then they have some examples here. So very good either way works fine. So again, we're in April. You're awarded the project in March. Here we are, April. You're just drafting your RFQ or letter of interest. And then May. So here you'll want to send your draft RFQ to NCDOT Dominique Boyd for his review. And so you just want to wait to hear back from him. And he's pretty fast. I'd give him a couple weeks. It's quite a bit of reading to do. In that time, you can start thinking about who you would like to have on your selection committee. So as you get your proposals back, who would you like to review those? You must include, again, NCDOT, Dominique Boyd in that meeting. Sometimes if you have a complex project, you might want to have NCDOT Division 10 or 12 reps. So that would be Stuart Basham or Anil Paniker for 12. If you want to have probably 5 members, I wouldn't have less than 4 members. I've seen selection committees as high as 7 or 8 people. You can certainly do that. Administratively, it's a little bit more, but it really depends on the project and the experience that you need to have in your committee. So here we are in May, June. Hopefully you've gotten everything back, and then you can actually advertise. I recommend advertising on your website as well as the IPS website, and NCDOT can help you post that. I actually have rights to post that too. Again, I would look at 3 weeks minimum, but probably 4, again, depending on the size of your project. Take a screenshot of your advertisement so you have a record of that. And if you do send out records of notices that you're advertising, keep all of that. And I won't open these. Here's an example of an addendum and a question and answer. It's on our website. It's a Word document. And so feel free to type over that. In June, it's probably going to be July is probably a little more realistic, but you will start receiving your proposals back. They need to be received. You need to follow state statute. Don't accept any after the deadline. You can start preparing your memo to your selection committee. And let me just bring this up real quick, because what I have done, and it's more of just to remind me what I'm doing. So what I have done in the past is I actually take these memos to the selection committee and I put it on top of the proposals along with the scorecard, and I'll show you an example of that in just a second. If you're receiving everything electronically, then I just take the body, the text in the body, and I use it in my email, or maybe even copy it again in the meeting invite. So here's just again reminding them that they're on the committee and thanking them, but also you can start to say, okay, this is how many we have received. It's a great idea to let the selection committee review the request for qualifications before you advertise, before it goes to Dominique too, so they know what they're reviewing and what your scope is, who you're trying to, or what you're trying to do with by hiring somebody. I would recommend setting up your selection committee meeting pretty far in advance, especially if you've got NCD, especially since you'll have NCDOT on the outside. You don't know what schedules are gonna meet up. And then a few things to consider when you're scoring, and remember, you've got to go against that criteria. But you can start looking at things, sometimes you will see a firm sometimes just repeat the statement of qualification or the statement of work, and so you can be savvy on that. So that's how I do that. You do want to have a no conflict of interest form. And again, it's something that you can take off our website, put your own logo on it, have your selection committee members sign it before you have your selection meeting, and you can just tuck it away in your file that you have it. It's just sort of protects you and everybody at your jurisdiction. Here is a sample scorecard. Again, you might have your own. Should open up. But if you'd like to use this one, so when you send out your stack of proposals, if you have a personal individual scorecard that goes, so they should be reading the submittals alone. Usually I fill out the company name for the selection committee member. They put their ratings here, and remember, up here is the criteria that you've used in the RFQ. They can use the rating. Here's the scoring. City of Charlotte typically does a 1 through 5. Use that up here. You'll have some members that like to do comments, some don't. The comments are super helpful in your selection committee meeting in starting conversations. So if you have 5 selection committee members, you'll have 5 of these back. So what I usually do is I ask for these scorecards back, and depending on what your calendar looks like, you can even get them back the morning of the selection committee meeting. Now, if they don't send them to you, that's okay. You're not breaking any rules, but it does help to see them to get the conversation going during the selection committee meeting. So what I do is I take those scorecards and I put them in this matrix. And again, this is an example filled out. I pulled the company name just to be fair. But when I get the individual scorecards back that I just showed you, I usually write rater A. You can, as they come in, you can do rater A, B, C, D, E, or whatever works for you. You'll remember how they come in. Or you can do something fun like Bob Cook could be B, rater B for Bob. It's all fun. So you put their score in here, you'll have a weighted criteria, and this will automatically weight the score. So you'll have rater A, you can fill out these in each one, and then over here, it'll calculate the score. And if you have like a dozen submittals, it'll be easier to start to see this. And again, these comments will be helpful in your meeting. Now, your final one is going to be public information. So you'll want to make sure there's, you make sure this is good, nice, polite, professional. Here's a blank one. And again, this is on our website, so feel free to download it. You'll want to, I left these in here, but make sure you fill these in, put your weight in here, and it should all work for you. All right, so you've prepared a scorecard, you've sent out the submittals to the committee to start reviewing, you're preparing for your selection meeting, you get the scorecards back, you fill out a matrix if you choose to use that, or whatever your town or city uses, then you hold the selection meeting. Remember, Dominique or somebody from NCDOT is there. And hopefully you come to a short list with the top firm. You're not truly selecting that firm as far as you're making a short list, but the selection, the top firm goes through NCDOT just to make sure everything is good with them, and then they will be awarded the contract. One thing I do for my own good is I started doing this years ago, and it looks tedious. Maybe it is. It might take an hour to do, but if you type over mine, it's not so bad, but it's a great record. And this is just the steps you took in your decision making. So if you need to go through a debrief or worse, you have some record. And so, this is the reason why you were doing the request for qualifications, and here is the process that you went for. So you started advertising. In this case, it was July 1st. For my own good, I just said that the RFP in this case was reviewed by NCDOT. 5 firms that were all pre-qualified submitted, and where I advertised, and then questions were due on this date. On this date, I answered them. There was no true addendum. I just answered the questions. Proposal date did not change. Again, there was no addendum. So I then collected in this time we had 5. And then I just made a note that they were all registered with the state, that they were pre-qualified. Again, how we selected them, on what criteria and the weight, and then who we ended up selecting. And again, Dominique Boyd, NCDOT, was on the selection committee. So he got to read all these proposals. And then he saw our process through, and then I just say it looks good, and this just goes in the file. Just food for thought. Actually, sometimes I upload this into our financial system. Again, if I retire, somebody can go back and look at it, and it's a real good audit trail for you. So, phew, we're at July 1st. So this is the true start of the fiscal year, and any work prior to July 1st is not reimbursable. But if you're following the steps, you haven't hired anybody to reimburse any time. And I'd highly recommend not executing any agreement with the consultant prior to July 1st. And it would be truly amazing if you had an agreement to execute by July 1st. But all of that needs to go through NCDOT and then to your board anyway. So like I said, it would be crazy. The applicant to create cost estimate. This is that step that I was saying that I didn't know needed to be done. So this is where you need to put together a little fee schedule, if you will, what you think needs to go into the cost for the work. Then I would start drafting the contract for the consultant. I didn't include an example to that. You probably all have that, but if you're a smaller jurisdiction and you need help with that, I'm happy to do that. Then you'll want to send the draft contract to NCDOT, and they will review the contract. Now, they're not necessarily looking at your clauses, but they will look at the time and the fees for sure. The fees will be reviewed by NC Office of Inspector General. You need to wait for that approval. So definitely need to wait. Just hang in there. It can take a month or two, depending on how complex your project is and how busy they are. I've seen it take a few months, but hang in there. Don't do anything. Here's an example of what a consultant fee proposal looks like. And I suspect, as Andy said earlier, if you're hiring a firm that's pre-qualified, chances are they've done some federal work, hopefully. But this is a good example of fee structure. So it's there. Then this one is just the cost for like cost per mile, or how much they can be reimbursed for lunch or something like that. So you're welcome to look at that. And so here we put in the timeline after OIG approval, because really it can vary. If it takes a month, if it takes 2 months, if it takes a couple weeks bonus, but you just don't want to do anything. So after they've given you approval, you can execute the agreement with your consultant. Well, depending on the size of the agreement, you may need to go to your board. So I don't know what your thresholds are. City of Charlotte's quite large, so that's probably not an issue. And then after you're all executed, you can issue your notice to proceed to the consultant, and woohoo, you can start doing your planning project. So the work with CRTPO is quarterly, and again, the grants are reimbursed. The applicant pays 100% upfront. Then you will request reimbursement from us, and we'll reimburse you 80%. These updates are done quarterly. As I said, if they need to be more frequent, we can do that. Usually I have a pretty good feel of how your project is going along anyway, but we need these quarterly reports. And let me just show you. It'll probably be Tamika Day. She's one of the newest members at CRTPO. She's online today. We will send you a request saying that we would like an update of the status of your project. Please complete the attached form, which I'll show you in a minute, and then return it. And so this is part of that quarterly reporting. And then we will ask you for detailed invoices, proof of payment, and then a letter. And I'm going to show you a really good example. Actually, Bjorn's online too, and he has great examples too. Here's an example of the fillable form. It's not much fun, but I think if you fill it out once at the beginning, save as, and then you can use it each quarter. So again, it's quarterly, and fill out your contact, the project name. Now, here's the important part is the brief summary of work that's been accomplished. So as I said, the City of Charlotte, CRTPO will reimburse you. We get reimbursed by NCDOT, and this will help with our update to NCDOT so we can get reimbursed. And then kind of the summary that you're expecting to do. If you're receiving, or if you have any challenges that's maybe slowing the project down, let us know that. We just don't want to be surprised here. And then it talks a little bit about the dollars, but let me show you. I actually have a completed one. Here's Iredale. This is a fourth quarter. It was his first time too, and he nailed it. Like he got all this down pat. So this is a cover letter to us where he's said what he's already applied for the reimbursement, and you can see the full invoice amount and then just the 80% reimbursable amount, and then he does a running total. And then down here he's got his filled in form, and he's got the amount spent, and then the amount for this quarter, the amount complete. And in this note, you'll see that there's a carryover. And I knew about this way back in, I think it was maybe January, February. So it wasn't a shock, but it's great that he wrote that down anyway. And then what he's included, and he's combined this all into an PDF for us. And so here's a copy of the cancel check. I can't imagine how hard this is to get. Hopefully it's not too bad with your finance. I know City of Charlotte, I would think that would be a hard thing to do, but maybe with a smaller jurisdiction, it would be easy. And then he has, RSNH was their consultant, so he has a report from them as well for our records. And again, we use this, and then he has a breakdown of RSNH's fees. So everything is signed off. This invoice amount, any payments to a sub, in this case it was Kittleson, so 4,600. And looks like there was another invoice within that quarter, so they paid RSNH twice. Here's in City of Charlotte, you will see this, so this is to Iredell County, but you will have your own purchase order, and it is just telling you the maximum amount that we'll reimburse. So every time we pay you, it is against this purchase order. So it was nice that he put that in there, probably not required. And then he includes NCDOT's letter of approval, which is great. And here's some of their fee breakdown. I think that's sort of it, but you're welcome to look at that. And again, these larger firms should know to do all that. And then, as I just mentioned in the example with Iredell, if you do have a carryover, if you can let us know by March, that's great. And then hopefully June 30th, your project is complete. And if not, you will let us know and we'll carry it over. So again, very high level. You apply for funds in August, October, and December, we start writing an agreement. In March, you'll get awarded the project. Hopefully right immediately afterwards, you start drafting your RFQ. It can take a little while. Then you want to send that to NCDOT for review. You form your selection committee, you advertise, wait to get all the proposals back, have your committee members read and score the submittals, have your selection meeting with NCDOT, and then start doing your negotiations, or actually executing your agreement with your consultant. Oh, sorry, I take that back. You'll want to start just negotiating your scope. And in this point, you'll want to create your cost estimate and then submit all of the fees on the draft contract to NCDOT. And then wait for the approval, and then you can start your planning project after July 1st. And then you'll do these quarterly reports, and we'll remind you of those. But you won't forget either, because you'll want to be reimbursed. Phew. So with that, took a little bit longer than I thought. So I'll open it up to questions. Dominique or Andy, do you have anything to add real quick?
No, I don't have anything else to add. You did a really great job explaining the steps that it'll take to get this accomplished. If anybody have any questions for me, I'm definitely here, and you can also email me the information that she had up there.
Well, with that, again.
This is Dave Hill.
Oh, thank you.
Just a quick question. Can you go over the, I guess, the evaluation criteria for the grant applications themselves?
The which criteria?
Or let me ask a more specific question.
Okay.
if a municipality is willing to supply more than the 80-20 minimum match, does that help our competitive standing?
Not so much with your planning projects. That's more true with your capital projects. So we typically just do 80-20 with the planning. And so on the planning applications, they'll come in, I'll review them, or other people on staff will review them, and then we'll take them to the project oversight committee. They'll review them, and they will review the totals, and we'll look at our budget. Typically, we try real hard to award all of the planning applications. And Bob Cook, if you're there and tuning in, would you like to add to that?
No, Jennifer, you covered it
Okay.
nicely. Nothing for me to add.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So yeah, I would stick with the 80-20. So again, part of the reason to do this webinar was to record it and get it on our website. So if you are awarded funds, you'll have that resource on our website. And again, feel free to download any of the information that we have, or reach out to me. Or if you have better examples or other examples, I'd love to see them and post them and let other jurisdictions use them. My influence from the city of Charlotte means that everything is super long. So you saw the RFP or the RFQ is super long. And sometimes the jurisdictions, especially if you decide to follow the NCDOT's template, you might be able to do something in 10 pages where it takes me 30. So chances are high that you have some really good examples that other jurisdictions could use. So I would invite you to share that. With that, it's almost 5 o'clock, and I'm sorry I took you for a whole hour, but I hope you found this helpful. And please feel free to reach out to me and NCDOT at any time, and I do have their email addresses on here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.